Hi, my name is Josh Malik from Septrum Ignis Productions. An underlying problem that will always continue to rise as different leaders take power is how resources should be divided and what an ideal financial system should look like. When we look at nature, we see that there are patterns in the form of eternal reoccurrences through every facet of life. When looking to nature to see how an efficient, self-regulating system operates in order to gain inspiration for a new financial system, one should look no further than within ourselves and our own bodily systems. In order to devise a system based off of the bodily functions of a human, one must first understand the processes that go on within the body, and one must also be able to calculate the statistics and numbers of all the cells and the various volumes of substances within the human system. As time passes, our understanding of our inner workings greatly increases, but will come to be perfected when we implement the machine into the scanning of our bodily systems, with AI being utilized to calculate and process everything that goes on in a healthy system. Many of us are taught in school at a young age to view the body's immune system and cell functions as an inner kingdom, with cells being likened to people. With the system proposed here, which is to be called Anthronomics, defined as an economy based off the inner biological workings of a human being, we will look at the gathered information on the numbering and functions of our internal systems, and mirror that onto a refined financial economic system. The reason it would be paramount that we base our economic system on the blueprint we all contain within is because it is something everyone, regardless of race, gender, or belief system, could identify with, and it is something that will remain unchanged regardless of where our species resides within the universe and regardless of how much resources, etc., are at our disposal. The reason it is not wise to base a financial system off of an external good such as gold is because if we are to have the perfected system based on a material, then all of a sudden a massive reserve of the material is found and created, then we now have a government that is forced to possibly withhold information, misadvise its citizens, and try to implement a degree of poverty over the people in contrast to what the newly discovered resource mandates. Whereas, if a financial system that is based on both the number of people and their bodily systems, the system can adapt and change regardless of environmental circumstances, and regardless of poor leadership decisions. So, in building this newly created anthropomorphic economic system, we will now look at the processes within the body. According to Britannica, Harvard Medical Papers, and several other government sources, where the numbers pertaining to the biological cell counts in this presentation have been garnered, our bodies contain between 20 and 40 trillion cells. For the purpose of the system presented here, it will be determined that our bodies contain 32.2 trillion cells. Of that, 68.9% of the cells are red blood cells, which are the most common cells, which as per this presentation amounts to a total of 22.2 trillion. These are to be likened to the civilian populations. Our brain is estimated to contain 171 billion cells, which is 0.5% of the total, and will be likened to our government, as well as those working in certain high-level information and technology sectors. As the brain cells process information, transfers, and governance of bodily systems, our lymphatic system, which produces white blood cells, contains 700 billion units, which is 2.1% of the whole, and is to be likened to our police, military, and militias, as the white blood cells are in charge of fighting parasites and infections within the body. Then we have our macrophages, which account to 227 billion, which is 0.7% of the total cells, and is to be likened to our healthcare personnel, as the macrophages store antibodies and trigger our immune system while maintaining health within the system. Then we have what will be labeled as miscellaneous cells, amounting to 8.9 trillion, which is 27.5% of the total cells, and is to be likened to those whom are on pension plans, homeless, receiving social assistance, as well as other more dormant persons, including children. And finally, we have our fat cells, which is to be likened to the super rich. An adult system is estimated to have around 33 billion fat cells, which is 0.001%, and these cells average to be about 6,000 times the size of a regular red blood cell, as they store energy reserves for the body. So what fuels this system? We eat food, and that is dissolved into nutrients, which is moved about the body through the bloodstream. So the blood is the life of the body, but the blood in of itself consists of many cells, so in further breaking it down, we find blood plasma. Blood contains 60% blood plasma, and it is the plasma that accounts for the nutrients, proteins, and fat that fuels all of our cells. So, it is the blood plasma that will be likened to the currency of the body, in turn giving a more positive connotation to the term blood money. It is also to be noted that each of our cells also contain about 60% blood plasma. A healthy adult has about 6 liters of blood, of which 3.6 liters is blood plasma, and the body produces about 1.2 liters of plasma each month, which is 33%. So, with these factors, we now have some basic tenets of the Anthronomic financial system. Attempting to base an economic system off the inner workings of the human body has more than likely been attempted before, but not to this degree as far as this world goes. And due to cutting-edge advances in science and technology, we are now coming to a more conclusive understanding of the numbers within the body, which in the end will allow for this system to be fine-tuned over time. An example of trying to link the inner workings of the human body with an outcome in the real world of the human populace is that it is a belief by certain fringe elitist sects that the human population of the world should be maintained at around 500 million people. So where would this number come from when looking at the human body? The obvious choice is through the sperm count of a male, which is between 200 and 600 million sperm. Furthermore, the reason this parallel would have been drawn is because a sperm is essentially a microscopic brain and nervous system that once reaching the egg goes on to grow into a greatly enlarged human with the same formerly microscopic brain and nervous system still intact. To look at this facet of life and say that since a male contains 500 million miniature human nervous systems, we should limit the human populace to such a number is not only absurd, but also dangerous, as certain types of people are privy to falling into suicidal death cult mindsets, as we have seen in times past. Whomever came to this conclusion failed to acknowledge that of the 500 million sperm, only one reaches the egg, and all the others perish. Therefore, in following a belief system stating that the human race should contain the same amount of people as that of a male's sperm count, one is stating that once the populace is reduced to that amount, only one will go on to expand into a new life. Civilizations are not built on the back of one. They are built on the backs of many working in unison. Therefore, the postulation that society should be built and kept at 500 million is an uninspired outlook based on a very limited view of anthropomorphic economics. So with this all being said, it becomes apparent that one needs to determine just how many people a fully realized anthronomic system would include, and subsequently, one would also need to determine how many people the world could really hold. Since the basis of this economic theory is a reflection of the physicality of the world around and within us, we could scientifically conclude that for one, the main component of our bodies is carbon, which is surpassed only by oxygen in prevalence. In order to extract a number from a mineral, we would need a shape. A predominant shape that can be found throughout our realm is the hexagon, which is also the shape of carbon molecules, and contains 6 sides. The reason we would need to find a number to attribute to a human is because with 32.2 trillion cells in our body, we know we need to divide that number into a smaller, more suitable number, as we are not single-celled organisms. So in looking at the hexagon, which is found everywhere in nature, from the shape of honeycombs to the North Pole of Saturn and the formation of snowflakes, we know that, as with everything in this realm, our bodies came into formation with the frequency of that shape. And if we are to add the symbols of fire, water, earth, and air on top of the hexagon, we then have a hexagram. There surely is a reason why the hexagram, or six-pointed star, has been held in such high regard throughout the ages. And the number that can be extracted from it is 6 sides, 6 triangles, and 6 points. Therefore, the number that is to be used for the Anthronomic system representing the human being is 666. And 32 trillion divided by 666 equals 48 billion. So the number of a fully realized, fully matured Anthronomic system would be 48 billion people, a number that is not all that far away from where we stand now at 7.7 billion people, and counting. If we were to utilize clean energy, efficient agriculture, with a leaning towards a plant-based diet, our planet could hold 48 billion people. As the reality is, the vast majority of the Earth is uninhabited. We just need to become more proficient at quickly setting up cities with advanced agriculture and clean energy systems. But in looking back at biology, it is estimated that humans carry 10 times the number of microbes within our bodies. So, this accounts for the bacteria of the gut and microorganisms in the blood. If we are to attribute this number to air-breathing animals, then the estimated 430 billion birds and mammals on Earth would equate to the bodily ratio of 43 billion people on Earth, which is close to the 48 billion that was reached through the previous calculation of the cells in this presentation. Furthermore, it is also interesting to note that the surface area of the planet is 71% water, which is the same ratio of water held within our bodily systems. By studying and coming to a more accurate conclusion of how many birds and mammals there are on Earth and equating that to the microbes within the body, we could say that nature is in turn scouting the Earth out for us and giving us an indicator as to how many people really could live on Earth if living in harmony with nature. So, the tenets of the Anthronomic turnkey formula is to garner the count of the brain cells, red blood cells, lymphocytes, macrophages, fat cells, and other cells, attribute them to their respective roles in society and the percentiles in existence. Then, determine the amount of blood plasma within the bodily system, along with how much is produced each month to account for the wages of the cells. The amount produced and used by society each month is to account for 33%, whereas the remaining 66% is to reside in circulation. With each new birth, a preset amount of currency is to be added to the Anthronomic system, and upon each death, a diminished amount removed from the system. The max amount the rich can hold is to be set in direct correlation with the amount being received by universal income recipients, which is monthly income times 3 times 6,000, due to the cell size variance of a fat cell and a regular cell, as will be expounded upon further. We will now look at a real-world example based on the populations of the US and Canada combined, which is around 365 million people. First, looking at the percentiles, in accordance to what was garnered at a cellular level of the differing cell groups, it would equate to there needing to be 1.9 million working in the government and high-end technology sectors, 251 million working as civilians in public sectors, 7.9 million working as police, military, and militias, 2.5 million working as healthcare workers, 373,000 as the rich, and 100 million as pensioners, children, underemployed persons, and miscellaneous low-cost individuals, all of which would be doing low-grade forms of work and/or community service while receiving an allotment of universal income. Furthermore, in determining that the median wages of the different sex, we would start that the civilian workers would make $30,000 a year, universal income recipients would receive 10.2K per year for anyone who makes under $1,500 per month. Government and technology sectors' median amount would be 64K. Police and military would be 39K, and health workers 38K. This would come to a total of $9 trillion needing to come in per year. Looking back at the blood plasma, it generates 33% new plasma each month. So with that in mind, it would mean that another $27 trillion needed to be kept in circulation at all times in accordance with the Anthronomics system, in the form of being held in government, corporate, and banking coffers. Finally, since 60% of the cell's mass is plasma, it would be reasonable to add that the working class would hold savings in the dollar amount of 3 times that of what they made for a single month, which would equate to $2 trillion, for a total amongst the working and non-working classes of $38 trillion in the Canadian and US economy, of which an additional $5.7 trillion would be possessed and competitively divided amongst the 373K rich class individuals. Which brings us to the rich. It was determined that the fat cells in our bodies are to represent the rich. A regular blood cell has a volume of 100 femtoliters, which is 1/10,000,000th of a cubic millimeter in size. A fat cell grows to be the size of 600,000 femtoliters, which is 6,000 times the volume of a red blood cell. So, with this in mind, if it is determined that the amount given as universal income to all persons making under $1,500 per month is $850 per month, then this would mean the max amount of currency a fat cell could hold in savings would be $15.3 million. One could say that there should just be a plain cap placed on how much an individual consisting within the richest class could hold in their bank. But since it was determined in the Anthronomics system that there would be around 373,000 fat cells and a populace of 364.7 million people, then with the policing with a worldwide AI machine system, it could be ensured that the shared wealth of the super rich could not exceed $5.7 trillion, and that whenever the amount did exceed that, the AI system would automatically log into the account of the richest and take money out until it reached the point of equilibrium or until it matched the second richest, whereby it would begin taking money from both accounts and so forth until equilibrium was obtained back under 5.7 trillion, and reroute it into paying for universal income, which would be a guaranteed $850 per month for anyone making under $1,500 per month. As for anyone outside of the 373 rich class, the total allowable amount they could retain would be $1.5 million, and if they had that, they would then be considered cells with a high cholesterol, which if there are too many, it would have deleterious effects on the circulation of the system. Once the rich class had leveled out and everyone had 15.3 million in their accounts, then maintaining their seats as allotted fat cells would depend on whom had the highest yearly income based on increments of 3.5 years. So for example, if someone inherits 60 million and after 3.5 years has not made more income than the bottom fat cell, all their money save 1.5 million would be funneled back into the system, paying for universal income. Once amongst the 373K rich class, one would not be able to give away more than 10% of their savings, as their purpose in the body would be to store surplus blood plasma money. And this money also would not be able to be loaned out by banks. Even if the universal income recipients were living in a tent city or under a bridge, as long as they were able to show up to the welfare office once a month to be biometrically ID'd, they would get their electronic transfer. And if they so chose to spend that money on drugs and self-destruction, then it would simply mean they are making their way through the bowels of the Anthronomics system. All in all, this would in effect add the cap to capitalism, and to budding entrepreneurs, the sky would still be the limit, only until the gravity of the system kicked in, in the rare case they were to become ultra successful. And with the auto-balancing AI monetary system, it would leave a strong degree of competition amongst the rich, as there would still be the possibility of billionaires, as only in the case of the 5.7 trillion being exceeded amongst the 373k richest would the balances and checks kick in, and as aforementioned, if all 373,000 were to become equally as rich, then they would all have a cap of 15.3 million in their banks, given the universal income was $850. If the universal income was $1,500, for instance, then the cap for the rich would be raised to $27 million. All of the major corporations of the body would be likened to the muscular system, whereas the 27 trillion held in circulation would be expected to flow through the corporations, i.e. leg muscles, military-industrial complex, i.e. arm muscles, government bodies, i.e. the heart muscle, and scientific research bodies and contemporary religious groups, i.e. neck and shoulder muscles, with the expectation to mostly flow back. In other words, generate at least the same equivalence in income as they use in costs through scientific breakthroughs, advances made in lowering costs of housing and agriculture, lessening costs of military output while keeping the same degree of protection, and income generation from corporations. How things in the system were to be balanced would depend on what kind of bodily anthronomic system was to be maintained. Would it be the body of an athlete, of a morbidly obese person, or someone with a chronic illness? Society would be made into a cashless system, where every individual was tagged in the system, and where commodities such as gold and precious jewels traditionally used as currencies would need to be replicated through technological means, whereby their worth would be greatly diminished, so that the currency of the system would be based in its entirety according to the Anthronomic system. All of the world economies would initially be divided into 6 Anthronomic systems, whereby those whom did not participate and account for all their currency in circulation would be omitted from the Anthronomic national trade, with all debts owing to them written off. This initial division would be done in anticipation of eventually moving into a one-world entity, and no money within the Anthronomic system would be permitted to be transferred to a non-Anthronomic system. To initialize the system with a lessened impact on the individual cells, 3 times the monthly anticipated income of each class of cell, not including fat cells, would need to be transferred into their respective banks, with 50% of the transferred funds automatically going towards the paying off of government debts owed by the individual, i.e. student loans, credit cards, etc. Interest rates on all debts owing would need to at least be slashed in half. The same would need to be done for entire countries, i.e. if the United States and Canada owed money to China, and all concerned parties had entered into the Anthronomic system, then the US and Canada economy would receive 27 trillion, with 13.5 trillion going to pay off their debts to other countries and vice versa. If it was determined that after everything was accounted for, by the AI system implemented to police the new world financial system, that there was still a balance owing to an unspecified and unaccountable party, then that amount would simply be deleted, i.e. debts owed to banks or countries that did not join the Anthronomic system. Whether politicians have been democratically elected or appointed in respect to their ability, the underlying decisions pertaining to the running of the Anthronomic system would be controlled by the machine AI to ensure 24/7 monitoring and no fallacies due to a sleight of hand or human error, and persons within the system having been both biometrically and genetically recorded would need to have DNA biometric check-ins on a regular basis to ensure the validity of the system. These will be the steps towards moving to a singular Anthronomic system as the human populace reaches the stage of maturity with a world population of 48 billion people, whereby, at that point, it will be time to split in 2, as a cell does, and move to a new world within the cosmos.